Well. Look at what just walked back into the room. You didn't announce yourself. You didn't send a warning. You didn't need to, because the moment you stepped through that door, 100 nervous systems registered the threat before a single brain caught up. And every single ego in that space started calculating their odds, ran the numbers, came up empty, and smiled at you anyway. That is the art. That is the weapon. That is what you've become without even trying. And before we go any further, the book is here. Joker's Crown. How the man they laughed at became the one they fear. Everything they mocked you for. Every room that dismissed you. Every moment you stayed silent while they celebrated too early. This book is the full breakdown of how that silence becomes the most dangerous weapon they never saw coming. Available now for just $3. No excuses, no gatekeeping, just the truth. Priced for the ones who are actually ready for it. Get it before the price changes. Link in bio. Let's be precise about what just happened in that room. Because precision matters. Because language matters. Because when 100 people simultaneously feel the ground shift under their feet, it is not an accident. It is not luck. It is not charisma alone. What just happened was a result of something they cannot study in any course, cannot buy with any amount of money, cannot fake for longer than 30 seconds before it collapses under the weight of its own performance. You did something rare, something the psychological textbooks call effortless authority, but the textbooks don't capture it correctly because textbooks are written by people who observed it from the outside. You didn't perform, you didn't try to dominate. You simply arrived with the full weight of everything you have survived, everything you refused to become, and everything you chose to build in silence while they were all very busy performing for each other. 100 egos just met something they haven't encountered in years. Something they forgot existed in the wild. They met a person who doesn't need them. Not in the quiet, polite way people pretend not to need each other. In the deep, structural way, the foundational way. The way a mountain doesn't need the wind's opinion to remain standing. And that's what cracked the first 50 before you even opened your mouth. The second 50 cracked the moment you did. So sit with that for a second. Not in arrogance, not in celebration, in understanding. Because understanding this is what separates the people who strike once by accident from the people who walk into every room this way for the rest of their lives. We are not here to celebrate a moment. We are here to dissect a truth, install it permanently, and send you back out there operating at a level they will never be able to explain no matter how long they try. Before you said a single word, something happened in their bodies that their minds hadn't processed yet. Their nervous systems ran a threat assessment, not consciously, not deliberately, automatically, involuntarily. The way prey animals scan the tree line before they know why they're scanning. And the result came back in one quiet, devastating biological verdict. This one is different. Proceed with caution. Do not attempt a casual power move on this one. That assessment happened because of something you cannot fake and cannot borrow. Something built molecule by molecule across every decision you made when no one was watching. It happened because of your relationship with discomfort. They could feel on some pre-verbal level that you have sat inside your worst moments without running, without collapsing, without outsourcing your composure to someone else's approval. That residue lives in the body. It shows in the posture, in the stillness, in the quality of the pause before you speak. The first 10 people who looked at you, they looked away first. Not because they were being polite, not because they were disinterested, Because holding eye contact with someone who genuinely doesn't need you to look at them is deeply destabilizing to a psychology built on mutual need. They are used to the subtle negotiation, the social eye contact that says, "I see you," and waits for, "I see you too." You did not participate in that negotiation, and it short-circuited them completely. The next 30 felt something different, a specific flavor of inadequacy that doesn't announce itself as inadequacy. It announced itself as irritation. They told themselves they found you arrogant. They told themselves you were putting on a performance. They told themselves any story that converted the feeling into something they could dismiss because the real feeling was far too uncomfortable to name. That they had been managing their lives at a level significantly below what is actually possible. And here was the evidence standing in their room, not bothering to prove anything. The last 60, they felt something much more complex, something layered, something that included genuine respect and genuine threat and genuine respect and genuine curiosity all at once. And that combination produced the behavior you probably noticed. They came to you, they initiated, they found reasons to be near you. Because the ego, for all its defensive architecture, is still drawn toward what it recognizes as superior, not out of admiration, out of strategy. They wanted to figure out what you have and how to get near it, which means they already know they don't have it. And that is the most complete victory available in a social space. Let's talk about what an ego actually is, because this is where it gets psychological. And this is where the real power lies. An ego is not confidence. An ego is not self-assurance. An ego is a defensive structure built to protect a wound. Every single ego in that room was built on the same basic architecture, a fear that without constant external validation, the self would dissolve. That fear is the foundation, the confidence, the charm, the wit, the status signaling. Those are the walls built over the foundation to keep anyone from seeing what's underneath. What you walked into that room with was not another ego. It was something the ego has no protocol for. You walked in with an identity that is not maintained by the room's reaction to it. Your sense of who you are does not get processed through their eyes before it reaches you. It originates internally. It stays internally, and it arrives at their perception already complete, already settled, already done negotiating. And when the ego encounters something that is not dependent on it, it experiences the only thing it is not designed to handle: irrelevance. The cracking sound, the one you probably felt rather than heard, happened when 100 people simultaneously realized that nothing they could say to you would restructure your perception of yourself. The usual weapons didn't apply. Being impressive at you wouldn't work because you weren't measuring. Being dismissive of you wouldn't work because you weren't asking. Being charming at you wouldn't work because you weren't hungry. The entire arsenal of the social ego was sitting in a pile on the floor, and none of it had a target. Here is the deeper truth, the one that makes this permanent rather than temporary. What broke them was not your strength. What broke them was their own reflection in you. Because when you remove the need for validation from the room and simply exist in your full capacity, you create a mirror. And in that mirror, everyone sees exactly how much of their own energy is currently being spent maintaining a performance for an audience that is equally performing for them. You showed them the machinery. You showed them the scaffolding. You showed them that the whole production is optional and they have never opted out. That is not a comfortable thing to see. That is not something they will thank you for. That is the kind of revelation that either cracks someone open into growth or sends them directly into resentment. And you will see both responses in the weeks ahead. The ones who resent you are the ones who looked in the mirror and chose to smash it rather than examine what it showed them. The ones who gravitate toward you, the ones who find reasons to orbit your life. They are the ones who looked and felt something shift. Pay attention to which ones do which. That information is extraordinarily valuable. You already know what your words did because you felt the room respond when you used them. But here is what most people never understand about psychological presence. The silence did more damage than anything you said. The pauses, the spaces between sentences, the moments when you simply did not fill the air with sound. Those were the moments that restructured the room's understanding of the power dynamics more completely than any argument, any display, any perfectly crafted statement ever could have. Most people are terrified of silence, deeply structurally terrified because silence creates a space that their anxiety immediately fills with worst-case scenarios. Silence in conversation means they don't like me. Silence after a statement means I said the wrong thing. Silence in a group means everyone is judging me. The ego is essentially a machine for converting silence into self-condemnation, and most people talk compulsively, reflexively, endlessly, not because they have things to say, but because silence feels like falling. You let it fall. You sat inside it. You used it deliberately with the full knowledge that every second of your comfort in it was being felt as a second of discomfort by everyone watching. The people who talk too much in uncomfortable silences, they are giving themselves away. They are showing you the exact shape of their anxiety. And every person in that room who started filling the silence after you created it, every person who jumped in with a joke or a comment or a meaningless observation to patch the hole you deliberately left, they handed you the map to their psychology without being asked. The most devastating single move available in a room full of egos is not the perfect comeback. It is not the impressive fact or the well-timed story. It is the ability to say something that lands with weight and then simply stop, hold the space, let the words sit there in the air, and watch what each person does with the discomfort you just created. The ones who nod and let it breathe are the ones who have some interior space of their own. Ones who immediately reach for a response, who scramble to match it or redirect it or dilute it. They are running on empty, performing continuity where there is none. And here is what makes the silence even more lethal in the specific context of a 100 egos in one space. Egos are competitive with each other. They are all simultaneously performing for each other and measuring each other, which means the energy in that room was already layered and charged before you arrived. And when you sat inside silence with total comfort, you didn't just disrupt your own dynamic with each person, you disrupted the entire social ecosystem, because suddenly everyone watching you be comfortable in the silence felt their own discomfort amplified, reflected, and broadcast back to them through the eyes of everyone else who was also watching. You collapsed 100 private negotiations into one public revelation. That is not something they will recover from by morning. Right now, in a minimum of a dozen separate conversations, you are the topic. Not because you did something dramatic, not because you performed, because you didn't perform. And that is the thing that is currently being dissected in kitchens and cars and group chats and bedrooms by people who cannot stop thinking about someone they spent maybe 4 hours near. You are the gap in their usual experience that their brains cannot file correctly. And the brain does not like unfiled experiences. So it keeps returning to them, compulsively looking for the pattern, looking for the category, looking for the explanation that will finally allow it to put you down and move on. Some of them will land on arrogance as the explanation. They will tell whoever will listen that you were cold, that you were trying too hard to be mysterious, that you thought you were better than everyone there. And the person they're talking to will nod and agree and validate the narrative, because that is the social function being served, not truth-telling, but wound management. Arrogant is the word that allows someone to convert their own inadequacy response into a moral judgment about you. It is not an assessment of your character, it is a confession of their experience. The moment someone calls you arrogant without knowing you, what they are actually saying is, I felt small near this person and I need a reason that isn't about me. Others will take a different approach. They will say you were interesting in that careful way that means something more. The way people say interesting when they mean I don't fully understand this yet, but I know it matters. These are the ones who are honest enough with themselves to notice that something significant happened without being able to articulate it fully. These are the ones who will think about you again tomorrow and the day after, and who will find themselves doing a strange inventory of their own habits and choices in the days ahead, not because you told them to, but because standing near someone operating at a different level creates a comparison that is very hard to unsee. The third group, and pay close attention to this group because they are the most strategically significant, will say almost nothing publicly, but will think about you constantly and privately. These are the people who felt the most impact and have the most to process. They will not describe you as arrogant because they are too honest. They will not describe you as interesting because that feels inadequate. They will simply carry the experience quietly. Let it work on them without narrating it to anyone. And you'll notice in future interactions that something has shifted. The difference will be subtle. The attention will be different in quality. These are the people who, in a single evening, move from peer to student without a single lesson being taught. The fourth group is the one you need to be aware of, the one that will make a move. Egos that crack under the weight of someone else's presence do not always go quietly. Sometimes they come back with a concentrated effort to re-establish the hierarchy they felt dissolve. Watch for the sudden expertise, the carefully researched counter-argument, the performance designed specifically for your attention. Watch for the over-explanation, the credential dropping, the social maneuver that is unmistakably engineered to reach you specifically. That is not aggression. That is the ego's last sincere attempt to matter to you. And your response to it, or more precisely, your non-response to it, will determine whether they escalate or finally rest. Here is the part they will never understand, even if you explain it to them directly. Even if you write it down and hand it to them and watch them read it with their own eyes, you did not plan this. Not this specifically. You did not wake up and design an emotional demolition of 100 nervous systems. What you did was spend a significant portion of your life making decisions that most people are not willing to make, and then you walked into a room and the accumulated result of those decisions arrived before you did and introduced itself without asking your permission. You chose at some point to stop performing for people who were not paying attention to the real you anyway. That choice, that specific renunciation, is not as small as it sounds. It required you to sit with the discomfort of being misread, mischaracterized, dismissed, and underestimated for long enough that you stopped caring whether you were read correctly. And somewhere in the middle of not caring whether you were read correctly, it became impossible to misread, because a person who is not performing for you is a person who is showing you exactly who they are. And there is a particular clarity to that which reads instantly and deeply even to people who cannot name what they are responding to. You chose at some point to let people leave, not to hold on, not to negotiate for their continued presence, not to reshape yourself into something more palatable to people who were fundamentally not compatible with where you were going. And every time you let someone leave without chasing them, you reclaimed a portion of your own energy that had been locked in the management of that relationship. Multiply that by every unnecessary relationship you released. And you understand why the quality of your presence in a room is what it is. You are not carrying that weight. They can feel its absence. They are all carrying theirs. And the contrast is not subtle. You chose at some critical junction that probably felt like failure at the time to stay in a difficult thing longer than was comfortable. Because leaving would have meant abandoning something you actually valued. That choice made under pressure in the absence of external reward, in the presence of every reason to quit. That choice installed something in you that cannot be installed any other way. Call it integrity. Call it internal consistency. Call it the alignment between what you say matters and what you actually do when it costs you. Whatever you call it, it is visible. It is felt. And it is the single most powerful component of what happened in that room tonight. The 100 egos that cracked today were not cracked by your performance. They were cracked by your non-performance. They were cracked by evidence, by living proof that the way they are spending their lives is a choice and not an inevitability. You showed them that it is possible to move through the world without running the constant social performance, without the anxiety maintenance, without the exhausting management of how you are being perceived at every moment. You showed them that someone chose differently and survived and arrived at something that they, with all their performance, have not arrived at. That is the most destabilizing thing one human being can show another. And you did it without trying, and that is the part that will keep them awake. They will come back. Not all of them, but the important ones will. And they will come back changed. And they will come back pretending not to be changed, which is the most important detail of all. Because a person who has been genuinely impacted and is too proud to admit it will approach you with a studied casualness that is exactly as casual as a chess move. And if you are paying attention, you will see the calculation underneath the ease, and you will know that you are dealing with someone who has spent time since you last met, thinking about how to stand near you without flinching again. This is where your real leverage lives. And by leverage, I do not mean manipulation. I mean the structural advantage that belongs to the person whose internal state is not dependent on the interaction's outcome. When they come back performing casual and you receive it with genuine ease, the asymmetry compounds because they are working. You are not. They are managing their presentation. You are simply present. And the energy cost of managing a performance versus the energy cost of being genuinely present is so vastly different that it shows continuously in every microsecond of the interaction. And they feel it every moment without being able to name it. The ones who come back with something to prove are the ones who give you the most information. Watch what they try to prove. Watch which specific qualities they perform in your presence that they did not perform before you met. If they perform expertise, you revealed an insecurity about their knowledge. If they perform social ease, you revealed an insecurity about their likability. If they perform busyness, you revealed an insecurity about their significance. People perform for their specific audience. And the performance is always precisely shaped around the wound that audience revealed. You become for a certain category of person, the one they are rehearsing for, and the more clearly you demonstrate that you are not measuring them by those metrics, the more intensely they will escalate the performance, which is its own quiet devastation to watch. The ones who come back genuinely are the rarest and the most valuable. These are the people who experience the crack not as defeat, but as opening. Who went home and sat with the discomfort instead of medicating it with narrative. Who asked themselves difficult questions instead of looking for a story that let them off the hook. These people are not coming back to compete. They're coming back because they felt something real near you, and they want more of what produced that feeling. Not specifically you, but the quality of presence you demonstrated, the reality of it, the texture of it, the proof that it exists in a human being and therefore might be possible for them. These people become the best people in your life. And then there's the very last category, the smallest, the most significant, the ones who don't come back at all. Not because they are resentful, not because they are unaffected, but because the experience was complete, because something shifted in a single encounter that did not require a follow-up. These are the interactions that ripple outward without your knowledge. The ones that echo in decisions made in rooms you will never enter, in conversations about situations you will never be told about. These are the most powerful impacts available to a human being, the kind that continue working long after you have moved on to the next thing, touching people who will never know your name. That is the reach of someone who operates at the level you operated at.